Hello and welcome. Well, making mistakes as a new parent is normal. Every parent has done it and no one is an exception. Of course, parenting a newborn has a lot of levels of complexity that requires skill and knowledge. The more knowledge we have, the greater we are equipped to make better parenting decisions. So to help share her skills, knowledge, expert information and advice, we welcome our special guest, Elsha Young. Now, Elsha is one of Australia's leading family therapists, a mum and co-owner and founder of the Peninsula Nest, a brand new hub and wellness centre for mums on the Mornington Peninsula. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Rachel. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. Here in Melbourne, we're both here at the moment in stage 4 and just getting through it as we were just chatting. um,
Yes, that's right.
And overall, I guess, as we were just mentioning before, two parents is a huge adjustment, which does require a great amount of skill. And it's only normal that parents want to be, the best parent that they can be. However, this can lead to a lot of parents putting, pressures on themselves, which can lead to undue stress. So I'd just love to know initially, what's your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, Rachel, I think that's a really important thing that, obviously becoming new parents, it's a wonderful time. It's
Mm-hmm.
a really special time, but it also can bring with it huge amounts of expectation and pressure that we can put on ourselves. And I think, as we were saying, living in Melbourne at the moment as well, I think now more than ever, I think parents are really feeling that stress. So I guess, it'd be great today to talk about, the things that we can do to give ourselves permission to just to be the best that we can in our roles as parents. And actually, babies don't need a great deal. They need us. They don't need all the toys and all these things that the messages we sometimes get from society. It's actually they need
Provided.
us in relationship. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, before we get stuck into that, I just wanted to speak a little bit more about your wider experience, which I think is really fascinating. So you've had more than a decade of experience in the industry, and it's been said that your personal aim is to advocate and help children and families heal from trauma and to empower themselves to make positive changes in their lives. Of course, hindsight is a very powerful thing, and looking back and taking experience throughout your career, what advice can you give to any newborn parent to help them just generally make positive changes into their lives?
Yeah, look, I think what I've learned in this work is that, again, it's, what we offer in relationship with our children is the most important thing we can offer. So helping to give our children the messages that the world is a safe place, that they can fall back on us, that we are there for them no matter what. So the things around children having messages of consistency and structure and routine, all of these things can really help with those
Yes.
messages. But really, it's about us being in it with them and what we can model around that we're there for them no matter what, and that we're available emotionally for our children. And that really enhances that sense of safety and helps to form their sense of identity and belonging and all those things that we need to become, integrated and well-adjusted human beings in society. Yeah.
Yes. Great advice. And just speaking a little bit more about your wider experience, your background includes youth homelessness crisis work, senior child protection work, family therapy for adolescents who use violence towards their parents and carers and siblings, and various other child trauma and family violence workshops for professionals. And this is truly admirable work, that you've worked with parents and children who are experiencing high vulnerability. Now, I'd love to know, in your experience, have you found that families, in particular with children aged in that 0 to 3 sort of demographic, in these specific communities where vulnerability is related to their background or socioeconomic status, do you find that they show greater success in advancing their children's development when they receive support from intensive parenting programs and experts such as yourselves? As yourself, of course.
Most definitely, Rachel. I think there's so much research to support the importance of early intervention services. And working in the group work capacity that I work in with early with infants and early childhood, as well as I do some work for an early intervention service as well. And I think it's been apparent for me in that work over the years of seeing the importance. That's when those little brains are open to building all those neural pathways. And, you know, it's why we talk about the importance of 0 to 3. And I do want to also preface that by saying, because I know parents sort of put pressure on themselves around that too. And it's okay. It doesn't mean we have to do everything perfectly either, but it is a really important time to help children to build that sense of identity and things, and build those, the resourcefulness, as we, you know, around their ability to self-regulate and their ability to learn and all of those things that go with it. So yes, I think the opportunity to do early intervention work is so important. It's not to say that later down the track doing adolescent work and things isn't successful, but I think wherever possible, early intervention work is incredibly important for the child and the family system as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now, getting back to, I guess, why we're here today, we published your article and the title is Top Tips for New Parents. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about and just tell us what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Well, the article is really about, I guess, you know, the key things that I guess as a professional, but also as a mother myself, the things, as we said before, hindsight is a wonderful thing. So the things that I've learnt myself, both professionally and personally, I guess, from, you know, becoming a parent. And I think, as we said earlier, there's so many messages out there, and that can land as a lot of pressure. So I think I wanted to hone in on what I felt were the key aspects of that, and the things that and to give any tips that, you know, that I found helpful myself, and what, you know, the families that I've worked with over the years have reflected back that have been helpful for them as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Now, I would love to know, how can, we're speaking about the pressures of being the perfect parent. So from your perspective, you know, how can the pressure to be a perfect parent take away from being present and connecting with your baby?
Well, just that in itself, Rachel, I think what our babies need is for us to be able to, because they're born without being able to regulate themselves, they're not able to communicate, obviously, what their needs are. They're completely reliant on us. So it's really important that what we are showing them is modeling that they are validated, that we see and hear them and can respond to all of their needs. So it's actually, you know, I think sometimes for parents, there's this, you know, they can be so in their head around trying to do the right thing that it can take away, as you say, that presence of just being in the moment. So just really simple things like, where possible, putting devices aside and just being able to sit down on the floor and play, make eye contact, using prosody of voice, like that tone of voice. All of those things give our babies the message that, you know, that we are in it with them, that we understand what they're communicating to us, because even though they don't have the verbal language at that age, they're actually pretty good little communicators. They're very attuned to us. So being really mindful about what we are, you know, how we are behaving is just something that, you know, we actually don't need all those other things. Just being present can be everything that your baby actually needs. Yeah.
And speaking about, you know, sort of being in your head a lot, you know, you mentioned to plan, to not have a plan, and for a parent just to let go of any high expectations that they may have, especially when it comes to the birth and just generally like with becoming a parent. So can you maybe just expand a little bit on this for us for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Look, and that was reflecting on my own personal experience. You know, I am someone that I'm a big planner. I have very high expectations of myself. And I remember thinking, you know, going when I was pregnant, thinking how, you know, I'm going to have to reshape how I think about this, because I'm going to be it's a very vulnerable situation. I'm going to have to trust the experts around me. And, you know, it was actually quite a freeing experience to do that, and to know that, to trust myself, you know. I think, so I really encourage parents to tap into that intuition, because everyone has it, you know, that gut instinct that we all have. And I think obviously when we're putting pressure on ourselves, when we're, you know, giving ourselves messages about what we should and shouldn't do, it's very hard to tap into that intuition. So the more that we can listen to that, I think the more that we can respond in a really attuned way. So yeah, I think that was something that I had to consciously be aware of from the get-go, and it really did serve me well. And I think that's why I thought, naming my own experience as, as a professional, to say I'm human too, and these were the things that I knew that I would have to consciously work on.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
believe that you adopted a mantra that helped you. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit about this and how did it help you?
Well, just letting myself know that it would always be okay. I think the mantra was to not have, the plan was to not have a plan. And that, as I said before, was actually just quite freeing, because it just takes away the expectation. And, all of that obviously derives from anxiety of us the more that we try to have control of things, we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to reduce that, anxiety of the fear of the unknown. So yeah, I think that was just something that really helped me to let go of some of those unrealistic expectations. And I think for new parents, that can be, just another added stress. And if it doesn't go to plan, it's another thing that we can sort of guilt and shame ourselves about.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
Just
yeah,
make life easier on yourself. Be kind to yourself and just release yourself of all
exactly.
those challenge that pressure and
Yeah,
just let it flow. Now,
yeah.
speaking about sort of the gut instincts and intuition that you were speaking about before, why should parents generally always follow their gut instincts, and how can parents? Do you have any other tips that they can help to just learn to trust themselves?
Well, I think it's about, when we think about the relationship and the bonding and attachment that's so important for babies, every relationship is different. So it's about, I think, reframing it and thinking about
Mhm.
that individual relationship between that parent and child is going to be unique for every situation.
Of
So
course.
I think thinking about it like that can also alleviate some of that, and know that you are the expert as that parent of that
Yep.
child. So trusting your instinct around that. Again, it's about listening to that, and your baby will show you those cues as well. So again, that's, I think, all examples of that attuned parenting, and reflective parenting, reflecting that back to your baby.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Now, you've spoken a little bit about when the baby arrives, and when the baby does arrive, it is a really precious time. It's a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
time, albeit busy with friends and family and everybody wanting to meet the new arrival.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in your opinion, why is it so important for new parents to put boundaries in place?
Well, because I think, as you say, Rachel, we often talk about what a beautiful time it is. Of course it is. It's an incredibly precious, special time. But it also is a bit of a roller coaster. And even just hormonally, like what's happening to women's bodies after they've given birth. And, it's about, I think, giving permission to talk about some of those things too. So I encourage parents to have these conversations before the birth, so that they can both be on the same page around, it's okay to not feel like you have to have everyone visiting, or that's absolutely okay. There'll be lots of time for all of that. So giving yourself permission to know that, that will be different for everyone. Some parents want to get out there and be social straight away. Others might need that time. It's a confidence thing too. This is a huge life stage transition. There is no right or wrong way. So I think the reason I wanted to mention those boundaries will be different for everybody, but I think they're an important thing, and encouraging people to talk about it before the baby arrives, I think, can be helpful, so that their parents can already be on the same page around that.
And there's a lot of cultures also that have that first 6 to 8 to 12 week period
Yeah,
where they don't see anyone really.
exactly.
So
That's
just
right.
so every situation,
Acknowledging, exactly, that's right. And I think that's, again, I think it's just hard when, sometimes parents will be seeing what other people are doing, and I think there's a lot of that can get kind of, people can put pressure on themselves about, it's okay if that's something that doesn't feel okay for you, it's okay to listen to that. And I think important to honor that, and go at the pace that feels okay, because this is ultimately those first days, hours, days, weeks, months, are all around building that attachment relationship with that primary caregivers, and so that is actually the most important part of that. So some mums have often said to me, I just want to go in my own little bubble and be, and with my baby, and just be in that space, and that's absolutely okay. And I guess the other part of that is probably important to note that we talk a lot about this instant love that, happens. And it's also probably important to note that it's quite normal if that doesn't happen immediately as well. Like any sort of love, it can take some time to build. And again, as we said earlier, it's a relationship that you're learning about one another. You're getting to know one another. So I think it's just probably important to note that too, that sometimes that's okay. And if that is feeling difficult, that there are supports out there to talk and reach out around that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So on that, once a baby arrives home and you are making that adjustment, many mums may experience the baby blues in the
Yeah.
initial few weeks. And that after this time, if the sadness continues, this can be the very early signs of postnatal depression also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
as you just mentioned, the first 6 to 8 weeks is a really challenging time in which I guess many mothers can sort of feel isolated as well. And as they say, it does take a community to raise a child. So, flowing on from that, once the parents are home with the newborn, why do you think it's so important for mums to stay connected with their friends and family, their mothers group, and not to be afraid to ask loved ones for help during sort of that initial and critical 6 to 8 weeks at home?
Well, it's like you just said, it actually takes a community to raise a child, and I think
Yeah.
it's actually really important for children to experience having multiple people in their lives that view them as worthy and lovable, and that, and safe, and all those things. So I think it's about how we encourage those conversations, that it's actually okay to, I think we can put pressure on ourselves that we have to be everything. And that's simply just not actually the case. It's actually important for for infants and children to build those other attachment relationships as well. But I also think it's really important to know that the chances are there's what you're going through, other people have also experienced too, and you don't have to. If you are having those struggles, there are a lot of supports out there. And it's actually around, I think I put this in the article, I say to parents a lot of the time, it's important to put your own oxygen mask on before you
You
help
do,
someone
yes.
else. So I think, sometimes as parents, I think we're kind of the last to look after ourselves, but it's really important that we are also nurtured and cared for. So things like self-care are actually really critical. And I often hear parents have a reluctance, they're doing everything for everyone else in the family, but their self-care is the very last thing. And I often, gently challenge that and say, actually, that should probably be at the top of the list, because if you have to be able to refuel your cup in order to be able to meet the needs of
100%.
others.
Yes.
So I think we maybe just, giving that message and saying it's okay to prioritize connecting with friends and doing the things that make you feel you, I think are actually really important. So just I think sometimes that transition of becoming a parent, it's a big identity change too, where we're trying to make sense of all of that. So I think I'd encourage parents to continue to do the things that make them feel them like themselves, and that help them to feel good, because that's only going to benefit their babies and their children. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, babies and children tend to be happier and thrive when their parents are happy and healthy themselves. And
Exactly.
so prioritizing your own self-care isn't selfish, it is
No,
essential.
definitely.
And self-care can be difficult for mothers to make time for themselves, making themselves a priority,
Mm-hmm.
because the focus, of course, is on the well-being, health and
Yeah.
well-being of the baby. So, why do you think so many mums do find that difficult to make themselves a priority?
Oh, I think it might be like the number of messages that come through. There's such a overwhelm of things, and I think just their own expectations. And sometimes, going into motherhood and parenthood, we might have an idea of what that's going to look like, and then if we don't feel that we can meet that need, it's we might have a response about feeling that we're not good enough, or but I think as we said, it's really important to separate that out, and for mums and dads to have that individual time for their own self-care as well.
I couldn't agree with you anymore.
Yeah.
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 And in saying that, understanding that time with the baby is something that can give us energy as well, and understanding that, as you mentioned earlier, that the only thing the baby really needs is you.
Yeah.
So there's that beautiful quote that reads, "The only toy that your baby needs is you."
Yeah.
And play is a great opportunity to not only just enjoy I guess the early stages of parenthood and actually everything that comes with it. But it's a great opportunity to teach your baby things like attachment, safety, and predictability also. And babies have, I guess, you know, like lots of opportunity. So I just wanted to know from your perspective, how can parents maybe sort of best sort of get the most out of that opportunity with play and to be able to
Sure.
teach the baby these things?
And I think that's a great question, Rachel, because I often hear parents will often say to me, I don't know how to play with my baby. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, because not all adults have had the opportunity. Like, it's actually something that can make people feel a bit uncomfortable. They're not sure. So it's, again, being able to listen to that intuition, let it go, and just try to embrace that playfulness and be led by the baby or child. They will show you. And the more that I think we're prepared to, read their cues and follow that, the more likely we're able to be building all those things, as you say, around attachment and things. So having some fun, being playful, things like for with infants, we know that babies love movement, so rocking and having it, dancing around the lounge room, singing. That singing is such a powerful one in regards to it's soothing, it's very regulating. We know that it helps, in regards to learning and so many things. So, all of those things. But I actually encourage parents to just be playful with it and, just have a go. But just, I think it is important. That sounds simple, but in this day and age when we're so busy and, I think it can be really hard. So like we said earlier, things like putting devices aside and getting down on the floor, being at the same level as your, baby or child, things like that can all make a difference. Just trying to be in that present moment with them without other distractions.
Yes. And speaking about reading cues, babies have such a very small window in which they are able to focus and engage, and small bursts are much more effective. So I'd love to know, from your perspective, do you have any tips for parents how they can best read their baby's cues?
Yeah, look, babies, as we said, they're pretty good little communicators. They will let us know. So things like their eye contact, if they're starting to avert their gaze and look a bit grisly, and maybe rubbing their eyes and things like that, they're usually the first signs that they're starting to get tired and a bit, maybe a bit overstimulated. So as you said, it's really important. We don't have to sit down and play for an hour. That's way too much for a baby. And even things like reading, that's great, but read your baby's cues with that. You don't have to read a whole book or things like that. So they will be able to show you, and just being able to read that and respond to their needs with that. They will be able to usually show you with those things. They might start to cry or get a bit, but usually they'll turn away and just show little signs of frustration with it. So I think that's really important. That's why to be relaxed and present and, just to watch and wonder around what's happening for your baby can be really helpful.
So is maintaining eye contact with a baby very important? You were saying when the baby's eye contact drifts away, that means they're maybe at that stage becoming more tired, connecting, and
making eye contact is very connecting for a baby. So it's very important. And they will try to seek your eye contact often. A lot of babies will, and it's a way of, to regulate. So, but yes, when they're starting to get overstimulated or tired and things like that, they will often start to avert their gaze. So that's a sign that you can look for with that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a really good tip. So when their eye contact starts to drift away, that is, I guess, a trigger, would I say, maybe to understand that they are either becoming tired or to make a change. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, I guess with so much sleep information available, it can be overwhelming for parents to think that their baby is not doing what they should be. especially when it comes to sort of how much and how often they should be sleeping. And I guess it's an important reminder that babies can't self-soothe, as you mentioned at the start of the chat. So that even as adults, we also wake up throughout the night. On any given night, I think any one of us very rarely ever sort of sleeps right through the whole night. So it's very unrealistic for us to think that babies will always and consistently sleep soundly right throughout the night, and that they're not likely to ever stir or cry or need to be fed or anything else like that, depending on age, of course. But in general, that they're are going to sort of have sound sleep consistently, because as adults we don't ourselves.
No,
So
that's right.
it's a little unrealistic to think that they should
Yeah.
stick to just, I guess, the regular patterns of sleep. So in your view, I mean, how is the best, what is maybe the best sleep advice that you can provide new parents, maybe that won't leave them sort of feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, just as you said, it's, again, sometimes the messages that we're receiving, and there's just so much information out there. So I often hear parents say, my baby's not doing what it's meant to, and it should be sleeping through the night. And, it's more, I think, the expectations that parents have as a result of, the many messages out there and information. So I think it is important to know that, yes, newborns are, and as we said, they're not able to self-soothe. So when they wake, they need us to be able to help to soothe them. So whether that's they've got a wet nappy, or they're hungry, or maybe when there might not be any of those things, they might just simply need a cuddle, and that's absolutely normal and okay. And I've had some parents express some reluctance around that, should I be doing that? Maybe that's not going to help them with their sleep. And for those very young infants, it's actually, you can't over cuddle your baby, or give it too much love, or that's actually just, that's not possible. So I just want to give that message to parents to again listen to what feels okay for you. And obviously, as you said, that depends at different ages and things. And if things are becoming problematic and you're feeling that you're struggling with that, there are supports out there. But for those early days, that was just a helpful way for me to think about it, that how often do I wake up during the night? Why would I expect my baby not to be stirring throughout the night? And I can't expect him to be able to self-soothe the way that that we know how to calm and regulate ourselves as adults.
Yes, that's a really, really valid point. So thank you for sharing that.
That's
Now,
okay.
earlier before, you mentioned that singing to your baby whilst still in the womb is great for many reasons, for development and emotionally, all kinds of stuff. So I'd just love for you to maybe just expand a little bit more on this, if you can, for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it benefits parents and babies, to be honest. I think, as I said, it can be a lovely way of play. I think, as we mentioned earlier, babies are very responsive to our eye contact, our facial expressions, our prosody of voice, as I said, that tone of voice, so that like high, low. So song captures all of those things, and it's very playful. It's often using touch, if you think about some of the nursery rhymes and things we use with babies. So it's a really lovely way of strengthening that connection, attachment relationship, and we know that it helps with lots of developmental things around learning and
Cognitive
so
as well.
there's cognitive,
Yep.
yeah, so there's so
Neural
many things
pathways.
that are really important in regards to singing. So, and it's such an easy thing. Again, we don't, it doesn't cost anything. We don't need any fancy toys for it. It's just something that we can do in relationship with our little ones. Yeah.
It's the same with playing music also.
Yeah, look, I think that's great too. Yeah, that's right. I think it's, and especially when babies and children get used to something, it's they love repetition and predictability, because they're things that help us to feel safe and secure when we know what's coming up next. That's really containing. So things like building that kind of songs and things into a routine are really helpful, like whether it's a bedtime routine or what have you. That can be a really nice way in regards to assisting with creating a nice, soothing, calming bedtime, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
I've heard many stories about mothers who have played a particular song whilst the baby was in the womb, and then once the baby arrives, they've played the same song, and there's been, oh, I know that song,
Yeah.
a bit of a reaction as well, which is really
Well,
beautiful.
that's right, and they're saying, the research has shown that babies is 8 months in the womb around recognizing the mother's voice and things. So it's really important to talk to our babies. And talking about isolation before, talking to your baby, for parents that are home just with their baby, talk to them for your own sanity as well, but for their benefit developmentally as well, can be a really nice thing. So yeah.
Good advice. And going back to the start of the interview, you're mentioning about breathing. So I'd love to know, why do you think breathing is so important in your role as a parent also?
Breathing is such an important part, and I know it sounds so simple, but it's actually really tricky to do proper deep breathing, the type of deep breathing that helps us to reduce our stress levels and increase our sense of calm. And the reason it's so powerful is because it increases those endorphins, whilst also reducing those cortisol levels, those stress hormones. So basically, it's something, again, we always have access to it. So I always like to encourage parents that, that can help empower them and know that they have this tool always readily available to them. But it is something that takes practice, like anything else. So practicing some nice deep breathing when you are calm is really important. And then when you need to use it in a time when you're feeling more activation, then it's going to be more helpful. So a time that might be really helpful for parents to use some deep breathing might be when you've tried everything else with your baby, when you've changed their nappy and they're fed and they've had a nap and they're still, distressed and crying. That can be very anxiety provoking for parents when we can't fix it, that sense of helplessness, So what we can do in that moment is actually focus on our own breathing, because we know the way that the brain works and those mirror neurons, that the more that we can regulate, then our babies will actually respond to that. So that's something that I often encourage parents to do. We can get very, wanting the need to focus on the baby and fix that situation, but actually sometimes it's about us listening to what's happening inside our bodies and trying to just calm our own nervous systems. And in turn, that will usually have a positive impact on our little ones too, and we will see a decrease in their activation.
Great
Yeah.
advice. Is there any particular breathing techniques that maybe you can recommend parents can look up and study after this chat today?
Look, there's so many out there, but the one that I often use especially for little kids that I work with, is just like finger breathing, where it's just like breathing in and then pausing and then breathing out. So it's all about the nice filling your tummy, and then it's about the pause as well. So not rushing it. We don't want that shallow breathing. So just nice, slow, deep breathing with the pause in the middle. So there's so much information out there. And I think what I do encourage people to do is to find, try a couple of things. There's lots of different mindfulness apps and things out there. So have a play around and see what works for you, because there's actually a lot of resources around that. But essentially it's around just the more that we can slow the breath and do some nice deep breathing, the more we're going to be able to calm our nervous systems.
Yep.
The key part.
And making it a habit, I think, as well. I was just
Yes.
reading before that I think it takes 66 days to form a
Mm-hmm.
habit. So if you can just make
Yeah.
time every day, even if it is just 5 minutes, which as many people say,
Exactly.
if you don't have 5 minutes, we don't have much, in the sense you've
Exactly.
got to find at least that 5 to 10 minutes for yourself every day and put yourself
That's right.
first as a priority.
And as we said, exactly. And as we said, it's something that requires practice. It's like going to the gym and getting fit, so it's not something to practice when you are feeling really activated, and it's not going, because it's a lot harder to do that then. So I really encourage people, as you say, to do that when you have a moment of calm, and then you feel more empowered to be able to utilize that in times of distress.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on, we were speaking about the fact that it takes a whole community to raise a child. Now, in your view, what role do you think community plays in raising a child, and how do you think people in general can access community support, especially during this COVID era that we're sort of living through at the moment?
Yeah. Look, I think the sense of community can bring so much to a child's life. It can help to create that sense of belonging. It can build that sense of identity, like we spoke about earlier. It can help give those really important messages about children feeling worthy and loved and increase their self-confidence. So all of those things are really important for child development, because the more people that are giving those messages, the more the child is going to feel that sense and confidence. So at the moment, I think that is a really, it's really important for people to reach out to supports if they're wanting and needing that, whether that be a maternal child health nurse or community health centres. There's, lots of different telephone counselling, crisis numbers and things available to people that are 24 hours.
And the Gidget Foundation.
Yeah, all of those, I think, so I just really encourage people to make sure that they're utilising, there are those supports there. This can be a really isolating time when becoming a new parent is meant to be all about celebrating and, having all those visitors and all those rituals around that. And, I'm very conscious that for new parents, there's a grief and loss, I think, around not being able to have those things. So I just think I'd like to validate that that's a really normal response. And there's a term, sort of disenfranchised grief, which kind of, I think, covers that in regards to when we don't have the rituals and the connections and relationships to help us through that, which right now, that's something that a lot of us are feeling. So for new parents, I think it's really important to know that there are supports there. You're not alone in that. And programs.
And to use them.
Yeah, that's right.
They're available and to be used, and in most cases, they're all free as well. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no shame, as you said at the start as well. Take off all the pressures that we put onto ourselves about perfect parenting. There is no perfect parent.
No.
It's just
there definitely isn't.
Be the best that you can, and there's no shame. Yeah. And a lot of those helpline numbers are anonymous also, so no one has to know.
Right.
It's
exactly.
It's about as I always say, working smarter, not harder, as well.
Yep.
So
it's a good point, definitely.
Now we've covered off a lot of information today. If you were to summarize your key messages for anyone watching and or listening, what would they be?
Look, I think everything we've spoken about today is around, especially given the current climate that we're in, I would just encourage people to be gentle and kind to themselves at the moment, and know that you are everything that your baby needs. So just being there and being curious about that, and having the time to get to know your baby is the most important thing you can do. That's it. It's not all the other messages that I think we get within society, and to know, just to keep looking after your own self-care too, to prioritize you in that as well. So that would be my key message, to know that, I think right now, I've been saying to all the families that I'm working with, this is not the time for us to try to be our best selves. This is about breathing and surviving and knowing that, there's a lot to be said about that whole theory around that sort of good enough, and there's a lot of research around attunement needs to be at, a certain percentage. It's not at 100%. That's not what our children need. And actually things like, ruptures and things are actually really important in relationships. It's how we repair that's the important part. So children know that we make mistakes, but you know what? After those things happen, we are there for them, and it doesn't change how we feel about them. And so, as you said, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. It's I just encourage people to be authentic and to just be able to be as present as possible, and know that right now that's not easy, and that's okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Elsha, you've shared some wonderful advice today. If parents have got any questions and would like to reach out with you after this interview today, whereabouts can they find you?
They can find me and also the co-founder Anna Fasolo at the Peninsula Nest.com.au. That's our group program for mums and bubs on the Mornington Peninsula. So we've got a Instagram and Facebook page as well. So please reach out with any questions, or if you'd like to find out a bit more about what we do, that would be great.
That's wonderful. We'll have all of those links in the show notes, as well as the link through to your article, which covers off in a lot more detail everything that we've spoken about today. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Take care, stay safe, and hope to have another chat in the not too distant future. Take care.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much. Thanks for
All right,
having
you're
me.
welcome. Okay, bye.
Thanks. Bye.